Hey,
Good
hey,
morning. How's it going?
good. How are you?
I'm doing good. How's your week been?
Awesome.
Good. That's great to hear.
Yeah, I went out 2 nights in a row and had a great time.
Awesome.
We're going to LA Tuesday and we'll be out there for a week.
Okay.
Um, Half working and half just us.
Nice.
Yeah, we're planning to meet Kay and Shelby too.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah,
Well, tell them I said hello.
we will.
I am still classes semester's going kind of nuts. I'm more than halfway through it though, and I keep saying I can handle anything for a semester. So
There you go.
um, just holding on.
I told you if you needed me to pick up a couple Sundays, I can.
I may ask you to do that at some point in the near future. I haven't. I need to kind of plan out the next couple of weeks and figure out um, what would buy me the most relief
Yeah,
and see if you're available. But you'll be gone next Sunday. You'll be in LA.
yeah, oh yeah.
Yeah.
How's Leo adjusting to school?
I think pretty well. I think the first semester is um, hard if you're an introvert and you're trying to meet people and figure out your place.
Yeah,
So, but he's gotten registered for next semester, and um, I enjoyed. We camped out last week, and I got to see him
yeah.
quite a bit. That was great. Um,
How often does he call?
he doesn't call.
Yeah, he's having a great
No, no, he texts.
time.
We call him, um, but he'll text and keep us up to date on stuff. Um, it's funny how much you know. Gosh, I mean, I feel like an old fogey when I say this kind of stuff. But back in the day, when we only had telephones we didn't have texting.
Right.
Um, now that we have texting, so many people they don't want to talk on the phone. Period. And I get it. I totally do. Um, but it's like for a long time that wasn't an option. If you wanted to
Right.
call, you had to call. Like you had to talk
Or
to
write a
someone.
letter, which would take weeks.
Right. Right. Well, my dad always laughs because my grandfather would answer the phone and he would say, because he didn't like to talk on the phone, he would say, "Hello," and he would say, "Great to hear you," and then he would say, "Well, here's your mom," and he would pass it over, like not like instantly he would pass the phone to Jenny, so Jenny would talk because he didn't like talking on the phone. So he would be nice on the phone, but he would hand it off as soon as he could. So yeah, Angie points out Leah has some good suite mates, and he's got a friend from that he knows from high school there also.
That helps.
Um, but so I didn't actually have. I mean, my freshman year I went to UAH before I transferred to Oglethorpe in Atlanta.
Mm.
Um, so I didn't really have a freshman year. I mean, I guess maybe I had two freshman years. I don't know. It was kind of and at that point, UAH was really a commuter school.
Right.
There may
Okay.
have been on
So
campus housing, but it was pretty small.
back in the olden days.
Back in the day.
These panelists better get rid of that. Might be put to work.
I'm sorry, what now?
So these panelists better be prepared. They might get put to work today.
Yeah. Well, Paul is not going to be here, so
Yeah, I saw that.
we'll have to divvy things up a little differently. I've had a challenge. Welcome, Jennifer. Thanks for coming on board today. Had a challenge this weekend trying to get to a 12-step program meeting. It's one of the things that I need to do. I've been to 12-step meetings before, variety of different ones, but for my I'm taking a class on substance use disorder, and it's been kind of a challenge because a lot of places have they're listed on the website, but they haven't updated their venue since COVID.
Right.
So I went to 2 yesterday, and neither one was open. So that was kind of frustrating. But I'm going to try again this evening to get to a NA meeting. Welcome, Miller.
Sorry, I forgot to start my video. Good morning.
That's right. Hey, it's good to see you. How you doing?
Pretty good. Sorry, I think my kid is awake.
Okay.
I think Rob's doing something about it.
I
It was just banging sound that came from her room. I don't know.
I laughed so hard about what Rob posted, the conversation about W and Y sounds.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. That's
I think, like the linguistics part of toddlerhood is probably my favorite. Like them like figuring out what words work with what. It's just so cute. I mean, we're both language nerds, so you know.
Oh, right. But it's hilarious, and it's hilarious what they'll put together. I mean, once, it's amazing. So, I mean, I remember being stunned, like, the kid has never heard this sequence of words in this order, but somehow has the capacity to put together new sentences that, they've never heard before. But, and then there's the humor value, which is obviously,
Yeah. Oh, you muted Tony.
But doesn't that kind of lend itself to the notion that we teach language the wrong way? Like the children do what's intuitive to them. And like, because it reminded me of, like, I saw this meme yesterday that said English is hard. There's one silent K in night and 4 silent Ks in knick-knack. And I'm like, yeah.
Yes.
And I think the babies are just doing what should be natural, but we mess things up with all these unnecessary letters.
Yeah.
Because why can't we say me? Why can't we always use me for the first person? Like, me want to go to the store. Like, me want to do, like.
That's what Elmo does.
The babies do. Like, it's got to be something to that. We unteach them that natural way of speaking.
And I think part of it is that, like, we emphasize, like, as a person who has tried to learn languages, like, you want to be perfect, you want to like have an adult conversation with somebody, but you realize that, like, children started, like, from down here, and we let them make mistakes all the time, and it's cute,
That's a good point, because, like, and we don't want to make mistakes. Like, if I'm taking Spanish, I don't want to make mistakes. I don't want to look foolish.
Right.
But so much is trial and error. Yeah.
That's my youngest. One day, a friend of mine was keeping them, and Charlie's like, "Me got a new pair of shoes," and then my friend looked and goes, "I got a new pair of shoes. Me got a new pair of shoes too."
So cute. Oh.
Yeah, we teach language all wrong. I'm with the babies.
Yeah, I had a language teacher who told me, this is a Welsh language teacher, who told me that, like, the best way to get fluent in Welsh is to have a Welsh mother who loves you. But
all other methods pale in their
Right.
success rate to that one, I guess.
Well, so we're at 10 o'clock. I know Paula's not joining us today. We're going to need to probably divvy up roles a little bit differently today. Let's see. I guess I'll just do the Hebrew Bible reading, since that's actually what I want to talk about anyway. And I guess if y'all can keep the roles that you had last week, Tony, if you can be liturgist, Rob, voice the people, and Miller, if you can do the New Testament reading, that would be great. Those of you who are joining us on streaming services, listening to our conversation, this is how house church starts. We gather informally. We talk about whatever, whatever's on our minds. And then we do liturgy, and then we have a message and discussion. And so we've been doing online house church for the last couple of years. So you are, if you're streaming, welcome to be part of this. If you want to make a comment of where you're watching from, if you're on Facebook, just leave it in the comments, or YouTube, similar thing. And then when we get to certain parts, when we get to the discussion part, when we get to the prayer part, love to have you lift up prayer concerns. If you have comments or things that you want to share about the message, love to have your feedback as well. That's how house church works. It's participatory. So I'm going to pull the liturgy up on the screen, and then we'll get started.
On this day in 1859, John Brown led a raid of 21 persons on Harper's Ferry with the aim of creating an army of emancipation, which would end slavery in the United States. Tomorrow, October 17th, is the Roman Catholic feast of St. John, the Dwarf of Egypt, who died in 405. The story goes that his spiritual director, St. Pombo, gave him a dry piece of wood and told him to plant it watered daily. After 3 years, it produced fruit. He found a monastery around the tree of obedience. John was a vegetarian for his whole monastic life. And tomorrow's also Maurice's birthday. He turns 18.
Oh, happy birthday, Maurice.
Greetings. Today we draw a circle not of exclusion, but of inclusion.
Our God has revealed that God's nature is love.
And the glory of God is a human being fully alive.
We come to be students of love and of life.
Learn and to teach, to share the wisdom of our ancestors.
Draw near and let us break together the bread of life.
Psalms 119, 97 through 104. I love your instruction. I think about it constantly.
Your commandment makes me wiser than my enemies, because it is always with me.
I have greater insight than all my teachers, because I contemplate your laws.
I have more understanding than the elders, because I guard your precepts.
I haven't set my feet on any evil path, so I can make sure to keep your word.
I haven't deviated from any of your rules, because you are the one who has taught me.
Your word is so pleasing to my taste buds. It's sweeter than honey in my mouth.
I'm studying your precepts. That's why I hate every false path.
So our Hebrew Bible reading is from Jeremiah 31, 27 through 34. The time is coming, declares the Lord, when I will plant seeds in Israel and Judah, and both people and animals will spring up. Just as I watched over them to dig up and pull down, to overthrow, destroy, and bring harm, so I will watch over them to build and plant, declares the Lord. In those days, people will no longer say, sour grapes eaten by parents leave a bitter taste in the mouths of their children, because everyone will die for their own sins. Whoever eats sour grapes will have a bitter taste in their own mouths. The time is coming, declares the Lord, when I will make a new covenant with the people of Israel and Judah. It won't be like the covenant I made with their ancestors when I took them by the hand to lead them out of the land of Egypt. They broke that covenant with me, even though I was their husband, declares the Lord. No, this is the covenant that I will make with the people of Israel after that time, declares the Lord. I will put my instructions within them and engrave them on their hearts. I will be their God, and they will be my people. They will no longer need to teach each other to say, know the Lord, because they will all know me, from the least of them to the greatest, declares the Lord. For I will forgive their wrongdoing and never again remember their sins.
Luke 18, 1-8. Jesus was telling them a parable about their need to pray continuously and not to be discouraged. He said, in a certain city, there was a judge who neither feared God nor respected people. In that city, there was a widow who kept coming to him, asking, give me justice in this case against my adversary. For a while, he refused, but finally said to himself, I don't fear God or respect people, but I will give this widow justice because she keeps bothering me. Otherwise, there will be no end to her coming here and embarrassing me. The Lord said, listen to what the unjust judge says. Won't God provide justice to his chosen people who cry out to him day and night? Will he be slow to help them? I tell you, he will give them justice quickly. But when the human one comes, will he find faithfulness on earth? May God bless the hearing of this word.
Thanks be to God.
Frederick Lewis Donaldson was a priest and activist for labor rights and women's suffrage. He preached a sermon in March in Westminster Abbey in London in 1925. In it, he listed 7 social sins as politics without principle, wealth without work, pleasure without conscience, knowledge without character, commerce and industry without morality, science without humanity, worship without sacrifice. Whoa.
Yeah, it's heavy stuff.
That's heavy.
Mahatma Gandhi quoted him several months later, apparently. You may have seen that listed as, I've seen posters of that before. It's kind of cool to see it.
That's deep and right in your face right now.
Yeah. So today, we'll go into a time of prayer at this point, and I'll get us started. And if those of you who are on Zoom or Facebook or YouTube, if you would like to lift up a prayer concern, you can simply put it in the comments and we'll read it out and incorporate that into our prayer. And let's see, I guess, can we get some folks to monitor? I can monitor YouTube if someone can monitor Facebook, and someone else can take a look at the Zoom chat.
I'm trying to monitor Facebook.
Okay, I got the Zoom chat now.
Okay, sounds great. All right, let's go to God in prayer. God, we are grateful that you are always with us and that you are more eager to hear our prayers than we are to speak them. That oftentimes we don't know what to say. We feel as though we should have the right words, but the words don't come. Or we simply feel a yearning or longing or fear in our hearts, and we don't know how to put it into words and address it to you. But God, you tell us that you are aware of our every thought, that you count every hair on our heads, that you number our days. You are intimately concerned with what concerns us. We hear often that you're too big or too busy. How could one as mighty, omnipotent, omniscient as you care about the concerns of petty human beings? But that's because you are everywhere. You are all loving and all knowing and all powerful. That's how, God, we know you care about every particle of your creation. We give you thanks that you see the electricity arcing across our neurons, and you understand what we fear. You understand what we long for. You know our griefs. We ask you, Lord, to be present with those who are struggling. And when we lift up prayers for peace, we know it's already your will that your world come to a just fruitfulness. So we lift up to you names and situations that are close to us. And I invite those of you who are watching and listening to share. Names and situations that are close to us.
For the family of Joe Gooding after the loss of his sister.
Lord, hear our prayer.
For the women and protesters in Iran.
Lord, hear our prayer.
For Teresa's mom, her grandparents, and Kristen, Teresa's niece.
Lord, hear our prayer.
Transgender children and adults.
Lord, hear our prayer.
For immigrants.
Lord, hear our prayer.
For all those who are already struggling and those who are anxious about the economy.
Lord, hear our prayer.
For Teresa.
Lord, hear our prayer.
For peace and calm in the upcoming elections.
Lord, hear our prayer.
For the 11-year-old Cruz and his medical team.
Lord, hear our prayer.
For students.
Lord, hear our prayer.
For Brandon.
Lord, hear our prayer.
For the homeless.
Lord, hear our prayer.
For those experiencing homelessness, especially the children.
Lord, hear our prayer.
Traveling mercies for Tony and Dimitri, and joy in their being able to meet with Shelby.
Lord, hear our prayer.
For safety and poor air quality.
Lord, hear our prayer.
For all who are struggling to make ends meet as we go into winter.
Lord, hear our prayer.
Gracious God, there is much that we pray for, there's much that we long for. And we know that our own longings are expressions of your divine striving for your reign, for the kingdom of God to be made real where we live, for abundant life to be made real for all people. And so we share in the prayer that Jesus taught us. Holy One, our Mother and Father, let your name be revered. Let your reign come. Let your will be done on earth as it is in the heavens. Give us today the bread we need for today, and forgive our sins as we forgive those who sin against us. Save us from the time of trial and deliver us from evil. For yours is the sovereignty, the power, and the glory, now and forever. Amen. So I wanted to talk a little bit about this passage from Jeremiah. I started talking about Jeremiah last week and talking about the exile, but there's some things he says in the passage today that I think are world-changing. And I think at the time he wrote them, they were a radical, different understanding of God. So perhaps you've heard someone say, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. Or maybe you've read some of William Faulkner's stories where he talks about the Snopes family. There's an old lying, cheating, mean as a snake character named, and I love this name, Flem Snopes. But if you meet either him in one story or one of his cousins in another one of Faulkner's novels, you know that if you meet one of the Snopes family, they're going to be just as bad. And if you're a charitable person, if you're a charitable reader, maybe you'll suspend your judgment. You'll give this member of the Snopes family the benefit of the doubt. But as soon as you do, watch out. And if you're a sociologist, you might talk about trauma being passed down from generation to generation. And if you're a scientist, you might talk about epigenetics and how nature plus nurture creates these outcomes. And if you're superstitious, you might talk about a family curse. But it really all amounts to the same thing, right? It's this idea that that trauma, sin, mistakes, all kinds of things get passed down from ancestors to their descendants. And so there was this old saying in Hebrew, and I think it probably rolls off the tongue better in Hebrew than in English, which is, the parents have eaten sour grapes and set the children's teeth on edge. Doesn't really flow, but you get the idea. So the taste, and I like this metaphor, the taste, the bitterness or sourness that the parent tastes, the child tastes in their own mouth generations later. Or in English, we just say, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. And maybe there are other sayings that you can think of that kind of express the same thing. When we hear this kind of talk, though, I think we have an internal struggle, and I think we should have an internal struggle between living individually and thinking of ourselves as individuals and thinking ourselves as part of a community or part of a family. So throughout history, I think we can see that most of history, most other cultures think about their own identity much more communally. Here in the United States, of course, it's all about the individual, rugged individualism. Everyone charts their own destiny. But if you look at most other cultures, there's a different understanding of identity. We are part of something bigger. I'm a manifestation of my family, right? And it's so much so, like when you go back and you read someone like Aristotle, who was 300 years before Jesus, when he's talking about the good life, how can you tell if someone has really lived the good life? How can you tell if someone has really been happy? He says you don't really know until they're dead, until they're dead and gone, because there's still more to life, right? Something could take a downward turn real quick. So he says you can't really make an evaluation of happiness or the good life until someone's dead. And then he says, and really, even if they die and then something awful happens to their children, then their life is negatively impacted, even though they're already dead. And he says, so really it's, that our happiness is bigger than us, that a good life extends before we're born and then after we die. And I think it's such a strange way for most of us to think, right? The idea that what happens to children then reflects on the parents are still connected to the children, ancestors are connected to their descendants. It's just a very different way of understanding things. So Jesus's people and Jeremiah's people, they see their whole history as a family drama. They all knew their sordid family tree because it's all right there in Genesis. There was a family with one sister and 12 brothers. What a family mix, right? How do you think that went? Second to last brother, the almost youngest, was a dreamer and a schemer, and his brothers sold him into slavery. And 400 years later, the whole family, all the family's descendants are slaves. And part of the issue is that those 12 brothers were descended from 2 squabbling brothers and 2 squabbling sisters, right? And the 2 sisters handmaidens. And they were all locked in this sordid family drama. And their father, Jacob, he was descended from Isaac, and Isaac's father tried to kill him, right? So you have this story of trauma going all the way back to Adam and Eve and Cain and Abel, right? This struggle of feeling like there's not enough love to go around, that something is being kept back from me, that I've been wronged, right? And so you have these stories of family drama, and the way they understood their whole society, their whole culture, is we are the inheritors of this family drama. All the way up to 500 years before Jesus, when the Babylonian army comes in and destroys their city and takes away exiles into Babylon. They said this is the end result of a long family drama of the sins of the parents are visited upon the children. So when Jeremiah starts off by saying no more, he says no more. This is no longer going to be true. He is really speaking counterculturally. He's making a theological shift. Jeremiah says, don't talk to me about apples falling from trees or the taste of sour grapes being tasted by the children. The day is coming, he says, when God will inscribe God's own law on our hearts. So the way that God wrote, like in stone on tablets with Moses, God's going to write God's law in our own hearts, and there's not going to be any hierarchy. No one's going to be teacher over the other person. We're all going to understand in our own consciences what God actually wants. And we're no longer going to say the sins of the parents will be visited upon the children, because we're going to have this level of moral autonomy that before people didn't really understand, right? I mean, this was a radical shift. And I think we've seen kind of a turn in our own culture, where because we've made this shift to sort of a radical individualism where moral autonomy is really the law, right? We're all our own individual people, where more people are beginning to understand, no, we still repeat family drama. I've seen so many memes in the last few years in social media where people say, essentially, my ancestral trauma ends with me, my family drama ends with me. Like, this is where I'm making a change. It's going to be different from here on out. And I think that's different than just radical individualism. It's recognizing we're connected, right? But we have this opportunity to move towards healing. The idea, I think, is that healing is just as contagious as sickness, that we can inherit good things just as well as we can inherit bad things. And that part of what Jesus comes to do is to inject a little bit of God's goodness into the family drama that's continuing, that there's this opportunity for healing. That's how we understand grace, right? That grace is different than karma. Karma is about, settling accounts. Grace is about breaking that and moving towards something new. That's kind of a caricature of karma. I would go back and critique that idea, but we're not going to do that right now. So look, I mean, the idea is that Jesus introduces something new, but Jeremiah was talking about this 500 years earlier. He's like, no, this is not just our ancestry is not our destiny. There's a different path that is available to us, a path toward less hierarchy, toward less trauma, toward less inherited pain. Now, I think it's really important that we highlight what Jeremiah says here, and that this is 500 years before Jesus, 500 years before Jesus. Because 400 years after Jesus, a very influential Christian came along by the name of St. Augustine, who said, oh, wait, what about original sin, this inherited sin that comes down? And I think that goes back against what Jeremiah was saying so strongly. I understand the concept of original sin, and I think there's different ways we could talk about it, because there is such a thing as inherited trauma. Again, epigenetics. We understand the way things are passed on, that we are connected to our ancestors, I think, in a different way. But what Jeremiah was saying is that there's an opportunity for healing to come into the plant, into the family tree. Paul even talks about, when he's writing about Jews and Gentiles, he said, God has the capability to graft on a new branch. God can graft on a new branch, and it can spread health to the whole tree. Again, this is a different way of thinking about how we're attached to the tree, right? I think it's more organic. It's a life-giving, abundant life perspective on how we're connected to the past and to the future. So I don't think the way forward is sort of this radical individualism. We know our ancestors are very much with us in our genes, in our spirits, in our institutions. And I think the truth is that we're being given a chance to bring health into a sick system. I think when Jesus talks about abundant life and healing, that he says these things are contagious. And that's why Jesus didn't fear the touch of lepers or associating with sinners, because we can pass on health and abundant life just as easily as we can pass on trauma and sickness. So I think that's really where Jeremiah was going in this passage. And I think he started it 500 years before Jesus. I wish we would go keep that thread going. Instead of making this Augustinian turn toward original sin and the idea that we're damned unless we fulfill certain criteria and check certain boxes. I think the life that Jesus offers is far more rich than that. So that's what I got today. I would love to hear your responses, feedback, criticisms, disagreements, all that stuff.
Well, you're talking about all the different names they call it in different cultures, and in the Southern Black cultures call it generational curse.
Yeah.
And you especially like in my religious, background, you hear about breaking chains and I'm like, you have to acknowledge what's actually going on though. You cannot just like wish your past, your problems away. You have to find a way to reconcile those. And I think sometimes, people who rely on, I guess we've turned it in the past, that magical Jesus thinking like, wow, Jesus is just gonna make this happen, without realizing that you got to do some work too. So if your generational curse is poverty, then you should be trying to figure out ways, if possible, now it comes with privilege, but ways to make the next generation better for your kids. Mm-hmm. And that could be something as simple as teaching them good habits of being good stewards over the earth. And it may not happen in this generation, but if you keep pushing people making the right decisions, it works out a little bit. I mean, somebody who grew up in abject poverty, I get it. I get it. But like, those curses, I think Chris had put in the chat, he's his father's son. Mm-hmm. Those things they can be broken, but it takes work. You just can't wish and pray that away.
Right. No, I do. I think that's a good point. I do think it's important that we not think just magically about it. Like, oh, there's this possibility means that automatically it happens. Like we wave a magic wand or Jesus comes and does some hocus pocus. But that it's participatory. Like there has to be work that goes into it, maybe from the individual, but also from the people around that individual. Because I don't think generational healing happens in isolation either. Yeah. I think that's part of the, we're not just individuals, right? Yeah, Miller, go ahead.
I see this huge metaphor. I've been reading this book called Entangled Life, which is about basically just fungi in general. And I remember there was this bit talking about how, our mitochondria and chloroplasts are probably like bacteria that like our cells took on at some point, and we're just like, oh yeah, this works. And like, yeah. So I mean, you were talking about grafting on a branch that creates health. I could see that in that. And I mean, they're also talking about like literally training fungi to eat, toxic waste, like VX gas and compounds like that. And I mean, obviously it seems like magic. Like it seems like, oh, if we could just find the right fungi and throw it at the thing, like it would work. But no, it's a process that fungi is actually like experimenting, Yeah. So like there's work being done at the at the cellular level. Like they're trying out different enzymes to see what works. So I don't know. I feel like there's a metaphor there.
Absolutely. That book's on my reading list too, by the way. I really would have I'm looking, so I love hearing your review of it. But I think there's a lot that we're learning from the natural world about this process too, that it's not this isn't just human centric, that this is a process that unfolds naturally too, that we are part of webs, and that kind of understanding the system is part of how we heal too. Yeah. Thank you for that. Yeah, Tony?
Oh, I was gonna raise some in the comments, but I was gonna let Rob say his because I'm pretty sure he's gonna put more on it than I can. So Rob, and then I'll take over the others.
Oh, you mean my comment in the chat?
Yeah,
Sure.
about the
I was
Protestant
just,
Reformation.
yeah, well, so yeah, you know, I just noticed that when you talk about 500 years between Jesus and Jeremiah, you know, that's about where we stand today relative to the beginning of the Protestant Reformation.
Yeah.
It's interesting that we don't hear about, like, you know, the Jeremiah Reformation or whatever, right? So I wonder what kind of, you know, hearing Jeremiah got.
Yeah.
Like this, you know, these ideas don't necessarily, I mean, it's in the canon, but it doesn't seem like it necessarily really got taken on board.
Right. No, I think you're right. Yeah. I mean, that's something to observe too. Like, because it's not like, oh, now suddenly everyone thinks this way because Jeremiah said it.
Yeah.
No, that's not how it works.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so Teresa says from 1920 to 1970, most children in our country were lead poisoned, no matter how independent their parents were, etc. What we do affects others.
Yeah.
Amen.
Yeah.
Like not wearing masks when you know you got COVID in a crowded building. That affects other people. Camille says, as an adopted child, I have been meeting my biological family, and my biological mom siblings have lived with the guilt of not keeping the children that their sister gave them for adoption. I've been telling them that they have no responsibility for their sister's actions and that we are all okay. Any feelings we have about being given up is our own to process, and it becomes a case of choosing who we want to be in this world. I so agree with that.
Wow. Camille, thanks for sharing that and sharing your story and your vulnerability in that.
Yes.
But and recognizing, like, I kind of try to tread carefully when I talk about this stuff because so many different families have so many different experiences, right? And making sure that I'm not making blanket statements that are, you know, someone will run with. I know I'm not Jeremiah, so I'm not really that worried about someone taking my, you know, words as theological doctrine.
You're our Jeremiah.
But yeah, I mean, recognizing that there's a lot of different experiences in this situation. Yeah. Go ahead, Rob.
Well, just thinking about trauma leading to drama. And I'm thinking again about ways that people, or especially families, understand themselves through making progress, right? You know, you definitely know or hear of or have been the person in a family who was the first one to go to college, or maybe the first one who, you know, didn't have to work with your hands. And I mean, of course, you know, work done with our hands is skillful and necessary and deserves respect, you know, but for some families, not having to do that, having someone who did something else becomes this big marker of like, oh, wow, things are changing for us, right? And I think it's interesting to sort of situate that in two different contexts. There's the individualistic idea of like, I'm getting out of this hick town or whatever, right? And then, but like Camille's comment really makes me think about, you know, the significance of individual choices to that bigger context, or individual opportunities, and the fact that, like, so maybe the person who was the first one to go to college is now that much more, you know, aware and able to help other people, and they're interested in doing that, right? And so you said something, Dave, when you were talking, I think you used the words spreading health. And I really love that. Wow, you can fit a lot into that as just like a, what am I going to try to do today? Sort of a concept, you know. Well, what is the mission of abundant living and gracious living, right? What are we trying to do in the world? Spread health. Wow, that, I don't think I've ever heard a pin put in it quite like that.
Thank you. Thanks for that. Yeah, Tony.
I got two things that I want to share, and really Camille's story just kind of got a little next to me. You know, as the product of a 14-year-old mother, we were adopted by my grandparents, so we were adopted within the family. And I want her to let her aunts and uncles know that whatever their reasons or not, I mean, it's really okay. I mean, we were fortunate enough, and even with Maurice, was fortunate enough to have someone within the family to adopt them. And I remember I used to try to make people who were adopted feel good by saying, well, at the end of the day, somebody did. If you were adopted, somebody made a conscious decision to want you.
Yeah.
Like you just don't happen on somebody to do it. That person made a conscious decision to want you. So in a way, you're kind of like one of the most wanted kids in the world. But some people are wanted by bad people. So like that's not a blanket statement, but like on the high side of it, if you were adopted by a good set of parents, first praise God and congratulations. But like that person really, really wanted you. And like I have some issues myself with like should I have gotten more of my sister's kids? Like, could I have afforded more of my sister's kids? Like, it's one of those things where you think about it, but you cannot beat yourself up about it because you cannot be responsible for other people's actions. I mean, we can try to help as much as we can, but like they should not, feel guilty about that under any circumstance.
I want to say that Tony's mom is awesome, by the way. I've met her. She's fantastic. So well, I do think I like, I mean, part of that is chosen family. I mean, sometimes like we are grafted into another family, or we are there's some kind of mixing or grafting or commingling that happens that changes trajectory. And I think it's important to acknowledge that. Yeah, Rob.
I guess conversely, it makes me want to think about ways in which families do let their members down. Because I mean, we were talking about not falling into an individualistic fallacy, and one individualistic fallacy is I'm going to go off and do good for myself by myself, right? But another individualistic fallacy is no one affects me. And I'm definitely aware of family situations or families where people who can, and honestly, I mean, who can and should have done better for some of their members, just did not for whatever reason. And I mean, for one thing, that's definitely some of the context that's out there about where the pain and the trauma comes from, that we try to spread health into. But I don't know, it just feels like it's important to reflect on how difficult maybe it can be for people to to be their best selves for some reasons, and how that propagates the negative, right? I'm just like when your family doesn't come through for you, you really feel it, right?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, one of the things that makes me mindful of is people who've been kicked out of their family for one reason or another. Whether it's sexual orientation from a family that has a more fundamentalist background, or someone the black sheep of the family, and those are things those are phrases we have, right, because of the way that people are treated. Anyway, Tony.
So Camille said, knowing my biological story, I feel so blessed. I felt I was thrown from the wreckage, and I'm trying to let the biological family know that I'm grateful to know them now. That is such a healthy perspective. Like, I was talking to someone the other night about people who experience certain types of trauma, usually like with sexual trauma, like where they experience that trauma is where they stop developing because they can't really move past that. So being able to own, your role in the situation or own where you are is very, very helpful, and not blaming everybody else. Because I know a lot of adopted kids who blame their biological parents, for whatever reason. And, it's like you just never know. I was going to put this in the chat, but being the fact that my mom was so young when she had me, I always thought like I was this accident, like this terrible accident. And when we were, my mom was dropping me off at school when I went out to college, and she was telling me how proud of me she was. I had 2 scholarships, I was like, and I had to tell her, Mom, I'm proud of you too. I said, I could have easily been aborted, given the time that I was born, and it wasn't safe, for you. And she was like, aborted? Like, that never crossed my mind. She said, you were my way out. She had a friend who had gotten pregnant, and her parents literally put her out. And my mom was in a really bad situation at home, and she thought that if she got pregnant, she could get out. Didn't work.
Yeah.
Did not work.
Yeah. Well, and it strikes me how, because a lot of those, we're familiar with those stories, but like those are Bible stories.
Yeah.
I mean, I think about like Isaac and Ishmael, and about like, the peril. And I mean, and there's so much, like, I mean, I'm going to get into analyzing it, but there's, patriarchy and trauma and slavery and everything else involved in that story. But sort of one of the key elements is that you have, this feeling of being wanted and the feeling of being unwanted, the feeling of rejection, both as spouse, as child, and how that reverberates down the generations. Yeah. Totally.
Miriam says, as mom, 2 of my 3 boys have been at odds with each other for 3 years, and no one is reaching out between them. My middle son is left to be the peacemaker. It makes her heart sad.
Yeah.
Children, we just, though they're probably those same little toddlers who were fighting when they were kids, and we really, when it comes to our siblings, we just get bigger. We stay the same. One of my sisters and I will go years without speaking to each other, but then we find our way back. Miriam, I would not, fret that too much. That's the dynamics of siblings. Again, I've gone a few years without speaking to one of my siblings.
Yeah. It's hard, and I'm trying not to talk about a whole lot about internal family systems, but people do, right? They take on roles. Peacemaker. I'm the firefighter. I'm the one who puts out
the provider.
I'm the rescuer. I'm the bad one. I'm the rebellious one. And people like take on and inhabit those roles. And I think part of it is, I think it comes back to that question, sort of like, it's not just about who am I, my own identity. It's about who am I in relation to other people. And I think that's one of the things when we understand faith in a non-sick way, that it's helping us to understand who are we in relation to other people. I mean, I think that's part of the whole, yes, you are siblings. I mean, the message of the Bible is, even the stranger, you're siblings with that stranger. There's a role you're playing with that stranger. There's a role they inhabit when they're talking to you. And we're part of a really big family, as with all its traumas and hangups and mess. Anyway. Yeah. Rob, you put your hand up.
Yeah, I look forward to your family systems theory devotional Bible.
Oh.
I think the sidebars about all the stuff going on in the history of Israel would be a fascinating read.
Yeah.
But honestly, just thinking more about, well, all right. So I'm going back to the Jeremiah passage, and the idea of it being written on our hearts, right? And it feels like there's both a healthy version of that idea and an unhealthy version of that idea, right? Because I think there's definitely folks for whom that has not gone beyond the level of just, I've memorized the rules so well and I keep them so well that it's like they're written on me and not on some stone tablet, right? And I just want to contrast that maybe with this idea that what Jeremiah is actually putting out there is, it's one thing for God to have given Moses the 10 commandments on these stone tablets and say, here, take these to the people, right? That's very remote. Like, hey, it's cool. God is interacting with us directly. We're like God's chosen people, but that still doesn't mean God cares about me, right? So to have it be that personal is sort of a way of talking about the fact that you personally matter to God, right? And that just takes us to the whole thing about like being, accepted, affirmed, right? As opposed to, preemptively rejected.
Yeah. And I think that also speaks to the non-hierarchical part, right? He's like, no one's going to call other people teacher, because they're all going to have the same knowledge of me. And I also think that speaks a little bit to what you're saying. I mean, in a situation where someone says, well, I know the law of God, it's written on my heart and I'm being very legalistic about it. It's the idea that, well, no, you come up against somebody else and they say, that's not how I understand God's law. You don't get it's not your place to tell them, well, you are beneath me. Like, I've got God's law, you don't. So you are therefore
I know
lower
some
status.
people who disagree with you on that.
I'm sure there are a lot of people in Alabama who would disagree with me about that. Yeah, I mean, just the whole idea that, like, my knowledge of God's law enables me to tell you that you are inferior.
They will fight you over that right there.
Sure.
I mean, that goes on. And, you know, I think that's the reason I brought it up, right? Is like, we definitely know that that goes on. So, I mean, it's a challenge maybe to spread health, you know, when other things are also being spread. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I think also part of what that Jeremiah passage says to people who would put themselves in an authority position is that, you know, it's also not your place to tell them that their ancestors are bad and their descendants are bad, because each person is responsible. Each person is answerable to God. It's not about their parents or whatever you're using to put someone in a lower position than you. Of course, my bias is towards egalitarianism, so that's where I'm going to see that. But okay, yeah, Miller, and then Tony. I know Tony's itching, so
Sure. Sorry.
No,
I think
go
it's
for it.
interesting to look. This is short. It's interesting to think about how people who are like so attached to this rugged individualism and like, well, you know, you should be able to do the bootstraps thing, and they aren't willing to acknowledge the need for reparations or the need for you know, student loan forgiveness. It's interesting how when you turn the tables and you're like, well, you should give up this like generational authority that you have over, you know, the country, over whatever, like they're like, no, that's heritage.
Right.
You know? Then heritage is important.
Right. Yep.
Oh, that's exactly where I was going, man. That was exactly where I was going. Because I cannot tell you the number of times I see people who call themselves white talking about, well, my great grandparents owned slaves. That ain't had nothing to do with me. Let's give up this 30 acres of land you got over here with all these trees on it and see how that works. Or give me my folks share what they did that you got for free. Like, literally, that's my head roll tide. Like, what? Like, literally, that's what they do. And it's like what? It's amazing to me that people can do that. And they have the nerve, the unmitigated gall to call themselves Christians. Like, it's just really, really like, ooh, it's a burn my family.
Right. Well, no, so, and I do think, because I could easily see this passage being applied to saying, well, yeah, people shouldn't have to do reparations. And because that fails to recognize that, and this is why I think it's not, we don't go to the radical individualism side, right? Because you're still part of a web that's benefiting from something that was done, you know, 50 years ago, 150 years ago, whatever. So like if you actually going to acknowledge that you're part of that web, then it's really about what's put on you to make things right? What share do you have in spreading health, in helping this contagious, abundant life get around? It's not going to be hoarding your private kingdom, right? Anyway. Yeah.
You had said something that triggered another thought about that. I know the individualism. It's like the individualism protects people from like being from communal responsibility. So like anytime, I hate AL.com. I don't like that Carol Robinson lady. I want her to get some cramps in her fingers one day so she can't type. But like literally every time a Black person does something in Birmingham, it's plastered all over this thing. I'm tired of hearing white people talk about how bad the crime is in Birmingham, blah, 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 blah. But then when that one Black person does something, it's all of us. It is absolutely all of us. But then you can have one of those school-age shooters come around here, oh, he was just a lone wolf. He was just a regular individual. They use that to protect themselves from communal responsibility. And it's really absolutely mind-boggling. And you know what? I started to troll people especially like
You?
yeah, me. Yeah, believe it or not, like especially people who call themselves white on those, and I'll say, well, you people did this. Oh, and when they, and it's almost like it might be ingrained in y'all spirit or something. Like it's the default reaction to say, oh no, I'm an individual, but I'm not an individual because I'm all black people.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
They'll make that quick some right there when I say you people. What do you mean, you people?
You speaking the truth. That is true. That is true. Yeah.
Go
ahead.
Sorry. No, I was just jumping in eagerly. Like the set of white people is the set of totally independent individuals who just happen to have everything.
Right.
That's what happens.
Just happened.
It just happened that way.
Accidentally.
It's not my fault.
Right. Well, so we're coming up on 11 o'clock, so I do want to kind of put a bow on this and get back to our liturgy. I really thank you for your discussion. I do think it's important. Like, so oftentimes we think about faith being this sort of sequestered. Like over here is the religious sphere, and then here's the family sphere, and here's the political sphere, and like no, they're all connected. Like they are all connected, and I think that's part of. If there's one thing I'm grateful about this 500-year cycle that we may be seeing certain kinds of reformation happening is that we're realizing that none of these are separate spheres. Like it is all connected. And I think about the movie Everything Everywhere All at Once, that it's like this is the world we live in, and that's kind of what we're experiencing now in this time of Reformation. It's everything is connected. So anyway, thank you all for exploring some of those connections with me. Yes, hot dog hands. That was my favorite scenes. So let's go.
Teresa said, "Tony, I can't believe you said Roll Tide this morning."
Well, especially after that pretty amazing.
I don't watch the football. Like I do not watch the football. Like I didn't realize they had lost until this morning. Till I got on Facebook and saw this meme. It had the tiger and the elephant, and it said trash talking this Monday morning. It's like, good morning. Good morning.
Hey, congratulations, Home Depot. Roll Tide.
Oh my goodness.
All right.
Help us get out of this.
Helper of all who turn to you, light of those in the dark, creator of all that grows from seed, promoter of all spiritual growth, have mercy, Lord, on me, and make me a temple fit for yourself. Do not scan my transgressions too closely, for if you are quick to notice my offenses, I shall not dare to appear before you in your great mercy, in your boundless compassion. Wash away my sins through Jesus Christ, your only child, the truly holy, the chief of our souls' healers. Through him may all glory be given to you, all power, honor, and praise throughout an unending succession of ages.
God is love. Nothing is wasted. All things shall be well. Go in peace.
So thank you for those of you who have tuned in on Facebook and YouTube. We're going to stop the live stream in just a minute. Those of you on Zoom, if you'll stick around for a minute more. Oh, before I go, just want to let you know, this afternoon at 3, I'm going to be leading an online nature and forest therapy session. So like if you wonder, how can you do that online? So the idea is you could do this in your backyard, but you go outside where you have a Wi-Fi connection. And it's really just about an hour and a half of time spent doing mindfulness in an outside environment. So if you're interested in doing that, you can join me at 3. There's a link from the St. Junia Facebook page, or if you want to get on meetup.com and look up forest bathing or St. Junia, you'll find it there. So thank you all for being with us today. I'm going to stop the live stream. Stick around.